The following program, Live and Learn, is made possible by Aging Partners. Find out more on their website.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Live and Learn. My name's Kim Hachia. Today, we're going to be talking to Beth Schuster of Aging Partners, and we're going to be talking about Aging Partners programs that include Dinner and a Show and the Nebraska History Brown Bag series that are coming up this summer. Stay tuned.
Hello, I'm Barb Tyler. I will be talking with Hannah Query, who is the program coordinator for the Lifespan Respite program in the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services, which is designed to give caregivers a break from the ongoing care of a loved one or friend.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Live and Learn. Today, we're going to be talking about atrial fibrillation, which is one of the most common heart ailments that people can experience. We're talking with a doctor from the Brian Hart, and stay tuned. I think it's going to be a really interesting segment.
Hello and welcome to Live and Learn. Today we have a special segment for you. We're going to say goodbye to one of our longtime hosts. Kristen Stows has decided to move on to some new things in her life, and we wanted to talk with her one more time to get her remembrances of her time on Live and Learn. It will be fun. Don't go away.
This and more on today's Live and Learn.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Live and Learn. My name's Kim Hachia. Here we are back on Zoom. Who knows how long that's going to last? But anyway, thank you very much to our friends at LNK TV and at Aging Partners for allowing us to stay safe during the pandemic and to still come to you with new programming. My guest today is Beth Schuster, and she is the Community Activities and Services Manager for Aging Partners. And we're going to be talking about some of the events that Aging Partners has set up for people to come to starting pretty soon here. We're going to start up in April, and we're going to be talking about two series in particular. One is called Dinner and a Show, and the other is called Nebraska History Lunch Series. So Beth, welcome to the show. It's good to have you.
Hi, Kim. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, here we are from our various offices, and it's kind of fun. We talked earlier this week about this, so we feel like old pros, don't we?
Exactly.
So tell me about the series that you, Aging Partners does for people, the planning of it, what's happening, and why you like to do these things.
Well, it's good to be back in the planning stages of these two events. The Dinner and Show is very popular. We couldn't hold them in the last couple of years, so we did have something that we had in place once we opened in June of 2021. We said, hey, we've got to plan a dinner and show just to get people going again. And we did successfully do that in fall. But now we've got our full programming going. This is very popular with folks. They come and they eat and have a great meal, and then they have great entertainment afterwards.
Right. And these occur at Ald Pavilion, which is where?
The Alt Pavilion is just in the park down here next to, I can't even get the address, sorry.
It's Antelope Park, right?
Antelope Park. I just drive there, Kim. And so yes, it's a nice venue, great parking. We set up the tables and the chairs for everybody and break them down again. And it allows us to do the social distancing that we may have to do. We're planning in a time where are we going to be wearing the mask? Are we going to be socially distancing? So we have to come up with all kinds of different alternatives. And thus the importance of reservations, because, we can only hold so many.
Absolutely. And then one of the draws is that it's a hot catered meal, and right?
Yes, a full meal. And it's all the comfort food. It's all the chicken fried steak and all that food. So everybody enjoys that. It's a good break for people, and it's a good price.
Right. So I know that we have we'll be running through the shows that are coming up, but because it's a hot meal, and because it's a little bit, we need to be planning. People absolutely need to make reservations for this, right? You can't just like pop in.
Right. Exactly. They would contact us down here at Aging Partners. it is going to be the 4417158 number.
Okay.
And so they would contact us. We take reservations and figure out. We kind of play it by ear to see, how many people we can fit in there safely. By the time this starts in April, we may be looking at different numbers, but we do have to have, each program has a date when those reservations end, just so we can gather it together and order our food.
Right. That totally makes sense. I know that we've been running the names of some of the artists, and they include somebody named Rick Clarence, Pop Radio Classics, the Lightning Bugs, which is kind of a smooth vocal trio, jazz trio, Janet Jeffries, who apparently does something called Vocal Varieties,
Yeah.
Helen Waring Johnson's Musical Hats from the Great American Songbook, which sounds super interesting to me. I can't even imagine what that must be like. Does she put different hats on? And
She does. It's a very vaudeville type performance. She does a lot of patriotic songs and changes up hats, and it's a fun program. We've had her before. We've had her in senior centers. Three Chords in a Cloud of Dust is a great group. But Bill Crestill, he's the cherry on the top here. He's the guy that, he knocks out Elvis Presley and Conway Twitty and Neil Diamond. And he's a performer that goes to Branson and performs. He's top of the line. We have to really be prepared for his show, because everybody wants that front seat, and so he's very popular.
yeah, that sounds fun. And obviously he must have a following if people are excited about him being there and doing things like that. That's I think it's interesting. You and I chatted earlier about just sort of the number of entertainers that we have in Lincoln that we don't really think about.
Yeah.
And they have groupies, I guess, which is kind of a funny way to put it. But yeah, I feel like you don't have any difficulty finding people to do these activities.
We don't. And, even though we had a couple of years or kind of wondering where everybody's at, but I tell you what, when I started to do these dinner and shows, I kind of went in there thinking, okay, here's the meal, here's the program. I'll just sit back and relax. But I was not bowled over how much talent we have, how really good these people do. They put on a great act, and I get a kick out of the fact that a lot of them most all of them are local, and
Yeah.
some of them are very aggressive in their schedule, and some of them just kind of come out with their friends and jam on our stage. So it's fun.
Yeah, I've known some of the fellows that are in the Lightning Bugs for a number of years, and I think they're they're a well-known band, and they do have a good following. So I salute y'all for coming up with what just looks like a really great slate of activities, and they go all the way into September. So we'll be rocking and rolling and whatever.
Well, and believe it or not, Kim, we're already making plans for the summer after. I mean,
Wow.
we're already looking at what can we, and they'll be different. I think we try to get Bill in every other summer because he's so popular.
Mhm.
But we change it up, and we're already making plans. So
Yeah. And so the other thing we were going to talk about is the Nebraska History Lunch series that you all are putting on. And it's a lunch. It's not an evening event. And so let's talk about those a little bit. We can scroll through the dates, but just talk in general about what that series is and what's happening there.
well, we've changed it up a little bit this year. Usually it was just different topics all summer long. And this year we're kind of having a theme where it's the government and the Capitol. And so I think someone could drop in anytime and get a very good series speaker. But I think this is building on stuff is going to really bring people back each and every time. And this is very popular. And it's an optional $6 fee for a sack lunch. I mean, some people want to have a sack lunch because they're doing something over a noon hour, and others just want to come and listen. Again, we'll probably taking reservations based on spacing and all that. In the past, we've packed them in the room, so we have to kind of be conscious of that.
Yeah, and this happens at Gear Library, which is the library that's near Holmes Park. Yeah, there's some really interesting things going on here. A lot of great speakers. I know that one of the things you guys are planning is a tour of the actual Capitol with Robert Ripley, who's the historic preservation officer for the Capitol. And that's kind of that'll be a great tour, but people need to really be conscious about the reservations and because it's limited in numbers, right?
Right, and I think it's kind of a build-up from the June 15th program, and so then they would have this presentation at the Capitol. And I don't know how often people go to the Capitol. I do know that it had been a long time since I visited the Capitol, and I was amazed at things that I hadn't seen before. So I think people are going to really enjoy this sequence of programs.
Right. I love our Capitol, and like you know, I don't go there very often, but when you walk in the door, you're just kind of blown away by how beautiful it is. And we're Capitol's going to be 90 years old this year, I think. I think it opened in 1932. Right. So and they've done so many things to ensure that it retains its original beauty. It's not like they said, oh, well, we need computers, so let's just rip out all the murals. And I really have to applaud the stewards of the Capitol for making sure that building remains just really a lovely icon and just really is important. I know that some of our other speakers are going to be talking about cool stuff too. My friend Bill Kelly is going to be talking about history of the death penalty in Nebraska. Both Jim McKee and Ed Zimmer always have really interesting things to talk about. It's hard to limit them to just an hour, I think. So
I know, and these guys are giving up their time for this, and
right.
We're so fortunate to have these storytellers. They're so very fortunate, and we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, and storytellers, that is really a good way to describe them, because they do tell the stories of these buildings and the people behind them and who designed them and what kind of thinking went into planning for these things. And they are definitely not dull lectures. These will be really fun, interesting programs, and I'm kind of looking forward to them. I hope that my schedule allows me to attend once in a while, because I think these are really, really cool. Once again, the numbers on the screen is 402-441-7158. Right. So if you want to attend this or the dinner and a show, that's the number that you call to make the reservation. And I think it'll be fun. I hope you just have standing room only crowds this year. I think everybody's ready to get out and go.
We are really ready. We've missed our folks and our programs.
Yeah. Well, Beth, we're out of time. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. And I want to remind our viewers that it's never too late to live and learn about your community.
Hi, I'm Randy Jones with Aging Partners. Did you know that Lincoln expects a 75% increase in the number of seniors living in our community over the next 15 years? Aging Partners is a community service that provides fitness programs to help keep older adults strong and healthy. This year, Lincoln Cares donations are providing funds for new fitness equipment. You can help make this happen. Sign up to support Lincoln Cares and add $1 to your LES bill each month.
Hello, I'm Barb Tyler, and I'm delighted to welcome Hannah Quiring, who coordinates the Lifespan Respite Program through Children and Family Services, a division of DHHS, or the Department of Health and Human Services. As our population is aging, Hannah, I imagine this program is a welcome change a choice for caregivers. Can you tell us exactly what this program offers?
Yes. Thank you for having me today to discuss the Lifespan Respite Program. This program is designed to provide funds for respite care or services to give unpaid caregivers a break from the demands of providing ongoing care for recipients with special needs that are unable to care for themselves. This program is without regard to age, type of special needs, or other status. There are additional programs within Children and Family Services that include respite within those programs, but Lifespan Respite is specifically provided for the caregiver to get a break and to reduce family and caregiver stress. Of course, we know caring for a loved one with a disability or a chronic medical condition can take a toll, both emotionally and financially, on the caregiver. So taking care of yourself, the caregiver, is one of the best and most effective ways to help your loved one. No matter how much you love or care for the person you're providing ongoing care for, you need regular breaks from that caregiving. And that is what the Lifespan Respite Program is for. The Lifespan Respite Program and the Nebraska Lifespan Respite Network, or the NLRN, provide support and connect family caregivers to respite care that gives the caregiver time to re-energize physically, mentally, and emotionally.
Yeah, in my other life, I always made the statement that if the caregiver doesn't take care of themselves, they're no use to anybody else, for sure. So Hannah, can you tell me what the typical client that you provide services for? What does that person look like?
Yes, absolutely. Respite is unique as it is a program that covers the lifespan. So a typical client that is eligible for the respite subsidy is a child or adult with special needs that requires ongoing care. Examples of special needs are developmental disabilities, physical disabilities, chronic illness, special healthcare needs, cognitive impairments, or physical, mental, or emotional conditions that require supervision. Respite can be provided in or out of the home, and it is tailored to fit the needs of the caregiver and the respite recipient. Some examples of respite options include, first, there is the individual provider. The provider can meet with the caregiver and family, much like an interview situation, and the caregiver then determines if the provider is a good fit for their loved one, and respite arrangements are made between the caregiver and the provider based upon needs and schedules. Secondly, there is the agency or organization provider. This is typically a community-based program or agency that provides respite out of the home on a prearranged schedule with the caregiver and respite recipient. For example, currently a family in Nebraska is using a local gymnastics center who is an approved provider for respite. The child with special needs participates in gymnastics classes while the family caregiver is able to take a much-needed break. This type of respite is more than just a break for the caregiver, but also gives the child a chance to socialize, learn a new skill, and build physical strength. Throughout the state, there are 6 areas of the Nebraska Lifespan Respite Network. This network is comprised of 6 area-specific coordinators that assist in providing support to caregivers, respite recipients, and then also the respite providers. The coordinators can assist caregivers with locating providers, whether individual or community-based, that are the best match for the recipient and the family.
I love that example of the gymnastics gym. That's really great for kids. So you can do so much, but are there any limits to what you can provide? And is there a certain set that people have to contract for a number of hours or days?
So respite, the provider is going to be hired by the caregiver and the family. The hours and the days are coordinated to fit the needs of the caregiver and the recipient. The caregiver can work with the provider to determine the hours, the pay rate, and the schedule. The provider must be a network screened provider, meaning that a background check and training have been completed prior to the person providing any respite support, which provides peace of mind to the caregiver. The program will provide up to $125 per month for those eligible recipients, and then up to an additional $1,000 per eligibility period with the approval of exceptional circumstance or crisis respite. Now, exceptional circumstance or crisis respite is directed toward providing respite in situations that are unplanned events that maybe affect the health or safety of the respite recipient, family caregiver, or when there is an immediate or unavoidable absence of the caregiver for an extended period when a qualified caregiver is unavailable.
Okay, so this sounds like it encompasses quite a bit, but are there any other programs within your division that offer respite for clients?
Yes, through the Home and Community-Based Services Waiver, which is a Medicaid-related program, there are respite options available to eligible adults. There are several other sources of potential payment for respite available for family caregivers. This includes those who are eligible for the aged and disabled medical waiver, the developmental disabilities Medicaid waiver, and the supplemental security income or disabled children's program. The Lifespan Respite Program is not for someone that is already receiving a respite benefit through another government program, though. This program is specifically available for the respite recipient and caregiver that are not currently eligible for any other programs.
So as you have gone through this program, can you give me any examples or testimonials on some families? You sent over one to me that I thought was interesting about the 34-year-old in the wheelchair and how he wanted to get to church so how did you help that family out?
That's a great story. There's a mother of a 34-year-old son who is wheelchair bound after a car accident, and she utilizes respite to go to church every Sunday. And this way she doesn't have to assist her son in getting ready to go to church or worry about him while she is at church for several hours. And this is coordinated with the respite coordinator for her area, and also through the selection of a provider that is able to fit those hours and that need.
And I love the story you provided about the retired history professor and how he got involved. Can you share that a little bit?
Yes, there is a respite provider that is a retired history professor, and he provides respite in the form of taking an elderly gentleman with dementia out weekly for a drive around the city, the community, to see and identify older businesses that are maybe no longer there, get their hair cut, or they just stay home and have a cup of coffee while the family caregiver, the wife, goes to run errands. So the care recipient doesn't feel like he is being babysat, so to speak, while the family caregiver is working on those weekly errands. And he's able to visit with somebody and have that social aspect, while also she is able to go out and take that time to run her errands. And the extra income doesn't hurt either, the respite provider has reported.
Well, I love these examples, but can you tell us how a person or family gets signed up for this help and how do they go about that?
Yes, there is an application process, and those applications for the respite program can be located in a few areas. Specifically, can be located on the DHHS website under Children and Family Services, or you can visit respite.ne.gov to find additional resources for caregivers, for the provider application, provider matching, and a link to the application for the respite program as well. Or you can contact your local respite coordinator by calling the toll-free number at 1-866-RESPITE, which is RESPITE. And this will put you in direct contact with a coordinator in your specific area. Coordinators are available to assist with applications, with billing documents, provider matching, and any questions you may have.
So do they go out and really kind of interview this person to see what would be the best fit for a caregiver?
They have a website that's called the Nebraska Resource and Referral System, and that the provider is able to put what skills they have, the disabilities or medical conditions they have experience working with, and then the caregiver and the coordinator can access that system to match to the specific needs of the care recipient, the respite recipient.
Any other stories you'd like to share? Excuse me, any other stories you'd like to share about providers or clients?
Yeah, I would love to share a story that was recently provided to us by a coordinator in the western area of the state. She contacted me to let me know that they have a couple that lives in the community, and they were hesitant to engage in respite, but they found that it was a great relief for not only the caregiver, the wife, but also for the husband, because the care recipient, as the provider comes to the home and is able to sit and visit with the respite recipient, and he shares stories of his time serving in the Army and all of the information that he likes to discuss about his time in being active duty. And the wife is able to go out into the community and complete errands or meet up with a friend for a cup of coffee. And it's really exciting to both of them that he's able to make that connection and share those stories. And she's also able to have that the time to run her errands.
I think this is just great. Again, in my previous life, I worked with a lot of respite givers and caretakers, and it's just I think it's a wonderful program to have. It's just a wonderful resource that a lot of people don't seem to know a lot about. Can you give the contact numbers again real quick before we wrap this up?
Yes, absolutely. You can contact a respite coordinator in your area by calling the toll-free number 1-866-RESPITE, RESPITE, or you can find more information by visiting the DHHS website and clicking on Children and Family Services to find more about the respite program, or visit our Nebraska Lifespan Respite Network website page at respite.ne.gov. And this provides resources on information for caregivers, caregiver support groups, discussion groups, and provider information.
So I missed that about the discussion group. So people can get involved and chat with other people in their similar circumstances and then feed off each other. That's a good idea.
Yes, there are several specific discussion groups that are available on that page.
Okay. Well, Hannah, I want to thank you for taking time today to talk about the Lifespan Respite Network and how it can benefit all of Nebraskans, even out to Western Nebraska. So thank you so very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I'm glad you've all been with us today. Please tune in again for more segments on topics of interest for seniors like this Lifespan Network. And as you remember, it's never too late to live and learn.
Vulnerable and senior adults might be living in silent fear of elder abuse and financial exploitation. We can do something about it. The Nebraska DHHS recommends that communities maintain and improve resources such as public transportation and senior centers to prevent social isolation. Engage professionals in various disciplines to find solutions to end elder abuse. Every year, June 15 is observed as World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, an opportunity to ensure justice for all.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Live and Learn. As you can see, we're still producing through the miracle of Zoom technology. And I want to give a big shout out to our friends at LNK TV and at Aging Partners and Brian Health for helping us put today's program together. You know, a lot of us have probably seen ads for medicines or other treatments for atrial fibrillation, also called Afib. And a lot of us may know somebody who has that disease or condition. We may have it ourselves, or maybe we're just wondering what is that? So we're going to talk today about this disorder with Dr. Michael Kuteli. He's a cardiac electrophysiologist with Brian Hart. Welcome to Live and Learn, Dr. Kuteli.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So first of all, let's define what AFib or atrial fibrillation is.
So atrial fibrillation is the most common heart rhythm irregularity that we see in clinical practice. It's what we call an arrhythmia, an abnormal heart rhythm disorder. Atrial fibrillation, essentially what it means is the top chambers of the heart, what we call the atria, are beating very erratically, irregularly, and it makes the heart rate go very fast.
So what causes that?
Well, that's a good question. There are a lot of associated risk factors for atrial fibrillation. We know that certainly age is the most predominant risk factor. You know, the older you are, the higher the likelihood that you develop atrial fibrillation. There are other risk factors as well, such as hypertension or high blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, lung conditions like obstructive sleep apnea, COPD, hyperthyroidism or an overactive thyroid, excessive alcohol use. There's a number of different risk factors that are associated with atrial fibrillation. The actual cause is not entirely clear as to why some patients develop atrial fibrillation and others don't.
So it's like a problem with the electrical part of your heart and not the, as my dad used to say, the plumbing part of your heart?
Exactly. So I'm a heart electrician, and we have plumbers, of course, that deal with the plumbing part of the heart. But yeah, so atrial fibrillation is an electrical disorder of the heart. And you could have a normal pump and still have atrial fibrillation. Certainly atrial fibrillation, if you're in it for persistently long amounts of time and the heart's beating very fast and irregularly, it can affect the heart pump. But, you know, in its essence, it's essentially an electrical problem primarily.
Right. And so you said it can affect the heart pump, but I know, like during the ads, they talk a lot about risk of stroke and blood clots. So how does that happen, and why? What do you do to prevent that?
Right. So exactly. Blood clots and stroke are the number one thing that we worry about when patients are diagnosed with atrial fibrillation. What happens, basically, the atria, the top chambers, are quivering or fibrillating. So when that happens, the atria are not squeezing and contracting like they otherwise normally would.
Mm-hmm.
In atrial fibrillation, the atria are beating so fast, the top chambers are beating at over 300 beats per minute, that the chambers don't really have time to relax and contract and relax and contract. And when that happens, the blood inside the chambers doesn't move very well. And when blood doesn't move, it can get stagnant and can clot. If a clot forms in the atrium and then goes down to the ventricle, the pumping chamber of the heart, it can then get pumped up to the brain or elsewhere in the body. And of course, if a clot goes to the brain, that's a stroke. So
Right.
atrial fibrillation is associated with a 5-fold increased rate of stroke. And so we always have to be very cognizant of patients' stroke risk when they develop atrial fibrillation. Now, not everyone with atrial fibrillation is at the same risk of having a stroke. If you're a very young person with atrial fibrillation, your risk of having a stroke is going to be low. If you're an elderly person, particularly above the age of 65, 75 years of age, your risk of stroke goes up. If you have other risk factors such as diabetes or high blood pressure, or if you've ever had a stroke in the past, if you've had heart failure or vascular disease, your risk of stroke with atrial fibrillation is also going to increase. So we look at these risk factors to determine who with atrial fibrillation needs to be treated with blood thinners, which is the main way we lower the stroke risk. Not everyone with AFib necessarily needs to be on a blood thinner, but if you have at least 2 of the risk factors I just mentioned and you have atrial fibrillation, we generally feel you ought to be on a blood thinner to lower your stroke risk.
Right. And then are there risks with those blood thinners?
Of course, any medicine can potentially have side effects and potential risks. And the main risks of blood thinners, of course, would be bleeding. However, when you look at risk and benefit, the risk of bleeding with these blood thinners, not as high as the risk potentially of stroke if you have atrial fibrillation and you're untreated. So what I'm trying to say is that if you're at risk for having a stroke with atrial fibrillation, your risk of having a stroke is higher than any potential downside to being on the blood thinner for many, many patients. So
well, and I know that there's new types of blood thinners too that are maybe, reduce that bleeding risk a little bit too.
Yeah, you're right. So, up until about 10, 12 years ago, the main blood thinner that we had in our armamentarium of medicines to treat people was warfarin or Coumadin. In the last decade, we've had the newer oral blood thinners that work in a different way, and they are generally safer and easier to take, and they don't have the peaks and valleys that you see with Coumadin, where patients' blood can be way too thin and then way too thick. So the newer blood thinners are easier to take and in large measure safer. Of course, any time you're on a blood thinner, there's going to be some risk of bleeding.
Right.
We have alternatives to blood thinners these days that we can use for people who are intolerant of blood thinners. There are procedures we can do to help lower the stroke risk and eventually get people off of those blood thinners. We can place devices now in the heart in the areas where clots tend to form, particularly the left atrial appendage, which is like this little pouch in the top chamber on the left side. And you can put this little occlusion device inside the left atrial appendage to lower that stroke risk for people who are unable to take blood thinners in the long term.
Right. So what are the symptoms of AFib? Like, how would I know that I have it? I know a couple of people that they found out they had AFib because they were at their doctor just for a regular checkup, and the doctor's like, oh, they did one of those EKG things. So
yeah, right. So atrial fibrillation, many people feel or experience it in different ways. Predominantly, people feel their heart skipping beats, what we call palpitations, a fluttering sensation in the chest. People can have associated shortness of breath, sometimes some chest discomfort, sometimes lightheadedness, sometimes fainting. But there are some people, like the friends that you mentioned, that have atrial fibrillation that is without symptoms or asymptomatic and diagnosed incidentally at a doctor's office.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever check your pulse, you could You can usually tell if you're in AFib if the pulse rate is very rapid, irregular, or thready. Normal heart rhythm should be very regular and steady at 70 beats per minute. Atrial fibrillation, the hallmark of atrial fibrillation is an irregularly irregular rhythm, meaning there's no rhyme or reason to it. The heart rate's all over the place. The bottom chambers are going at 60 minutes one minute, it's 150 the next. And so the pulse gets very irregular and fast and sometimes difficult to feel.
I know my mother always said she could tell when she had slipped out of rhythm, and that she felt like she described it as having a fish flopping around in her chest, that she could really feel it. And then sometimes it would spontaneously go back, but eventually it didn't. So I guess we could talk about, what are some of the treatments then? You are this, you work with the electricity parts. I know and we talked about that plug thing, but so what are some of the treatments there?
So we talked about blood thinners being the main treatment, of course, to lower the most dreaded complication of atrial fibrillation, which is blood clotting and stroke. But in terms of managing atrial fibrillation itself, you look at ways to slow the heart rate down with medicines. The bottom chambers, you want to make sure those bottom chambers aren't going very fast. So there are commonly prescribed blood pressure medicines like beta blockers or calcium channel blockers that we can use to slow those bottom chambers down. We also can use drugs to restore normal rhythm, what we call antiarrhythmic drugs. These drugs help maintain a normal sinus rhythm, a normal rhythm. Shocking the heart, a procedure called a cardioversion, is one way to restore sinus rhythm, normal rhythm, in patients who are persistently in atrial fibrillation, where, unlike your mother, her episodes of atrial fibrillation were paroxysmal. They came and went in bursts, and usually resolve spontaneously within a few days, sometimes hours, sometimes days up to a week. There are some patients who have persistent atrial fibrillation where, short of someone helping them out and getting them back in a normal rhythm, they'll stay in AFib. So that cardioversion procedure is one way to restore normal rhythm. And then, of course, we have other procedures we can do that are a bit more invasive. Catheter ablation, that's where we use catheters through a vein in the leg. We go up inside the heart and we start cauterizing or sometimes freezing inside the left atrium, the top chamber on the left side, where atrial fibrillation tends to start. And that can be sometimes curative for atrial fibrillation. So a lot of different ways to manage atrial fibrillation. Sometimes pacemakers can assist in managing atrial fibrillation and its symptoms as well.
Wow. So if you think you have this, or is this like a call 911 emergency? Is this a go to your general practitioner, internal medicine person? What should people do if they have questions about that?
So always talk to your doctor, your general practitioner, if you suspect you have atrial fibrillation. As a general rule, when should you call 911? Well, that's really driven by your symptoms and how bad you're feeling. I mean, obviously, if you're in distress and you're having chest pain, you're lightheaded, you're passing out, or, God forbid, you're having symptoms of stroke, then you need to seek medical attention immediately.
Right.
If it's just a matter of you've felt your pulse beating a little erratically and you're wondering about atrial fibrillation, that doesn't necessarily warrant a trip to the emergency room. But I would definitely be in contact with your primary care provider or your cardiologist to help determine whether you have this diagnosis. We live in a miraculous time where now there are gadgets that we can use to also monitor our rhythms, whether that's a smart watch or there are even devices that work with your smartphone, if you have one, to monitor your rhythm that are fairly accurate and can give you a sense of whether you're in normal rhythm or atrial fibrillation.
Yeah, I've noticed ads for that on TV, and also, like Apple has a thing running right now about using your iPhone or your Apple Watch to help monitor that. And I think I'm sort of fascinated by that. I think that's a real interesting new technology. You said we live in a miraculous world, and I just think in the course of your and my lifetime, just the things that we can do to help people cope with these, not only medically but surgically and other interventions. I think it's phenomenal. I'm fascinated by the whole deal. So
it really is, and I feel like some of this new technology has empowered patients, to keep, track of their own health. And so it's just great, if you're fortunate enough to have one of these devices, they're pretty useful.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't want to, I was going to ask you if you recommend a particular device, but I think that's probably not something I mean,
yeah,
I think they're all kind of interesting. And
yeah, there are a lot of good ones. And I think it's probably not within my, sorry, this mask, it's not within my scope to recommend one over the other, but
right.
If you look online, you could probably find a number of reputable ones, or talk to your healthcare provider. They can recommend some as well.
Right. I have to laugh that to note that even a person like you who wears masks every day struggles with them just like I do. So
yeah.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? We're out of time, and I really thank you for giving us your time today. I know you're really busy, and thank you very much for explaining this, because I think it is an important thing that people should know a little bit about this disorder, since it is so common, particularly among the demographics of the people who enjoy our program. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. And I'd like to remind everybody who's watching us today that it's never too late to live and learn about your heart.
Hi, I'm Randy Jones with Aging Partners. Did you know that Lincoln expects a 75% increase in the number of seniors living in our community over the next 15 years? Aging Partners is a community service that provides fitness programs to help keep older adults strong and healthy. This year, Lincoln Cares donations are providing funds for new fitness equipment. You can help make this happen. Sign up to support Lincoln Cares and add $1 to your LES bill each month.
Hello and welcome to Live and Learn. I'm your host, Jerry Renaud. It was just about 10 years ago that viewers of Live and Learn tuned in and saw Kristen Stoes begin as a host for the program. And now, some 80 interviews later and a Family Emmy Award, we'll have more on that later, she has decided to move on to some other things. I was very privileged to have been able to work with Kristen for the past 5 years, and we didn't want to let her go without talking about some of her memorable interview segments and her time as a host. Kristen, thanks for taking a little extra time for us this week so we can do this.
It's my pleasure, Jerry. It feels different on this side.
But it does. But it does. Well, you'll have to get used to it, I guess.
I guess.
All right. It's always a little of a difficult place of where we jump off on this. We talked on the phone and sort of talked for about 30, 45 minutes or so the other day about all kinds of things. But let's talk, I guess, first about what in the world made you decide that this was something that you wanted to do.
Sure. That's a good place to start. Growing up, I've always had respect for the older generation. I was an only child. I was an only grandchild. So you can imagine that I revered my elders. Plus, my grandfather had been in the Navy in World War I, and my father had been a pilot in World War II. So I certainly respected and understood veterans. So that was always in the back of my mind. When I turned 60, 10 years ago, I just felt that I needed to do something different, something to get me out of my comfort zone that I'd never done before. I saw an ad in Living Well magazine, and they were advertising for a new host. And I thought, well, maybe I'll try that, see if I like that. So I was supposed to get a guest of my own, write my own script, come down and have a taping. I called a good friend of mine, Joyce Timian, who I knew had a wonderful story of being the first Golden Girl at the University of Nebraska. That would be the first female band member, fabulous baton twirler. So I called Joyce and she said, sure, let's do this. This will be fun.
And was it fun? Or was it a little nerve-wracking?
It was very nerve-wracking. Oh my gosh, I was so nervous. And our interview wasn't really long enough. They kept saying, could you stretch that a little? And I finally said, I think this is all I have. Everyone was so nice.
Good. Okay. So this goes well, and you get the gig, and you start doing some interviews. So let's talk a little bit about the one with Beverly Ashley. I think that's a good jumping off point for a lot of reasons.
Right.
And we have a clip of it we're going to show in a little bit. It's actually a bit prophetic of what is happening now. I know it's...
Yes, and I think that's why I chose this clip in getting ready. We wanted to show a little clip of something, and it was hard to choose one, but this seemed to be really prophetic, as you say. When I went to my first production meeting, it was suggested to me that I contact Beverly Ashley. She was newly retired from LPS. She'd been a teacher and an administrator for 35 years. She found out that she was quite artistic in retirement. She'd never done anything in art before, and she got into the element of collage. I love collage, so I thought that was meant to be. Met with her at her apartment. Oh my goodness, her apartment was filled with just gorgeous pieces that she had made. So I had her on, and the piece that will be in the clip is entitled Janus. And it's looking forward and looking back, and her explanation of the piece really sets the stage for what we're going through right now.
All right, let's take a quick look at it.
Welcome, Beverly.
Thank you, Kristen.
Beverly has become an artist since her retirement and has a wonderful philosophy of life and of art to share with us today. At our first meeting, Beverly, I was greeted at your beautifully decorated doorway by a lovely piece of art entitled Janus. I'd like to start today by having you explain how you created this piece. It is located behind me.
I kind of stumbled onto that. Janus is the name of the Roman god for January. January is named after the god Janus. And I happened to find a picture of a woman that showed the front view and a side view. And I thought, aha, that would be a good replica of Janus. So I began with that idea. This would be my goddess, Janus, so to speak. Janus, the face of one side faces backwards, looking at the year behind. So for example, we might look at the past year, but on the opposite side is her face then looking forward into the future. Legend states that when Janus looked behind, he had a big frown on his face. He was disappointed in the year that had transpired. When she looked ahead, or when he looked ahead, there was smile and optimism and so on. And that's what I tried to illustrate in the picture. I used the cutouts, the tear-outs of collage, that technique, ribbon and some paper napkin, that type of thing. But that's how I began.
So as you can tell, it really was prophetic. And it's a similar scenario that we're going through now with the pandemic. Life has certainly changed for everyone over these past couple of years, and it certainly did change things for us here at Live and Learn with having to learn about Zoom, which we're even on today. We've gotten a little better at it, but that was really quite a change, wasn't it?
It has been a change, and I think the pandemic will change many aspects of our lives forever. Zoom is really a two-edged sword. How lucky we have been to have this medium the last 2 years to stay in contact. Wow. But I'm really ready to get back out and join society in person once more.
Yes, that personal touch has been missing. We played at one of the retirement homes yesterday, and when it was over, a woman came up to me and she said, "Are you guys doing hugs?" And I said, "Sure, let's do a hug." And then later I went, "Oh, probably shouldn't have done that." But yeah,
we do virtual hugs, I guess.
Yeah, right. Okay. I think all hosts find sort of some interesting topics that they come up with, and usually there's an area or two that we all like to come back to, that we're pretty comfortable with, or we have an interest in. You had a couple of them, second careers, and you talked a little bit about that earlier, but also in the area of health. How did those come about? Is that something that you had planned, or did it just happen?
I'm not sure if it was planned or not. I feel that it's important to bring subjects of health and healthcare to every community, but certainly the senior population. And I so appreciated the physicians and other healthcare professionals that would appear with me and give the facts and figures. I'll tell you, those were difficult to put together. I really had to work hard on those to come up to speed on whatever area we were going to be talking about.
Yeah, I mean, the health is challenging because you have to use the language that everybody's going to understand. And sometimes when you're talking about experts in that field, the dialogue can be a little challenging sometimes. So you always did a great job with that, I thought. As we're talking about health, one of the interviews you did was on Alzheimer's. And it was a series, actually. Boy, that had to have been a difficult one. I have some personal experience with that. So that's real challenging. Tell us how that one came about. It's really one that I found really powerful.
Yes, that was a tough one. It was suggested that I try to put together a 4-part series on Alzheimer's disease. And I just had a hard time getting out of the starting blocks with that one. I had it in the back of my mind for a while. And one day I went to the International Quilt Museum and had a docent-led tour. And she walked into a gallery that was full of quilts that were done by Professor Michael James. He was a caregiver for his wife, Judy, who was experiencing Alzheimer's. They were so beautiful. And I just stood in that gallery, and I get emotional to this right now, because I thought, here is my starting block. Michael James, I will get in touch with him. And he appeared with me for one segment and showed how his quilts showed the progression of Judy and himself going through Alzheimer's for 18 months. And I was so privileged to be able to tell their story. I really was. And then from there, I had other physicians on, and all 4 segments went together for one show on Alzheimer's disease. And it was important to show that human side.
Yeah, again, I thought it was quite powerful. It is one of those areas that is probably going to impact all of us at some point in time, whether it's somebody we know or a family member or a friend somewhere along the line. It's good to at least have a little knowledge about it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, I think so too. Almost everyone is impacted by a neurologic disease or something like Alzheimer's. And so we need to know.
One of the things that really stuck out for me in our conversations is your ability to make that human connection with all of your guests and with all of your interviews. And I think it's something that, I mean, we all try to do, but you really did it well. How did you find a way to make that happen?
You know, with me, I almost have to make that human connection to begin any kind of a creative work. So that's kind of what I would start with. I'd either start with a patient or a caregiver or someone who has walked the walk of the disease process that I was talking about, because it's only if you include that along with the wonderful medical knowledge from a physician that would appear that you get the whole story. And I think we're so fortunate in Lincoln with the medical care that we get. And I'm just really indebted to people who would come on and speak from their heart and tell you what it's like to be dealing with that disease.
Yeah, and that's again, it was a great trait that you were able to make them feel comfortable and to be able to come on and to be able to do that. And I know that one of the people that you sort of give some credit to that helped you in the very early stages of being a host on Live and Learn was that you got a chance to work with Lita Powell-Drake. And, you know, we recently lost Lita, which is real sad, but she did all kinds of great things in life, but she was kind of a mentor for you, was she not?
Lita truly was. Our first meeting was honestly pretty humorous. I went down to the studio knowing that another guest host, or not guest host, but another new host was going to be starting that day. And I walked in and I saw Lita Powell Drake and I thought, well, she must be here for something else today. And she walked right over and she said, hi, I'm Lita Powell Drake. I'm one of the new hosts. And I went, oh my goodness, so am I. It unnerved me just a little bit because she was such a TV icon.
Yeah.
But she was so wonderful and would answer all my questions. And honestly, all you had to do was watch Lita and learn. And so she was truly a mentor for me. I'm so glad that we had 10 years together, really, almost 10 years. Yeah.
And you said that, I mean, you had a chance to work with lots of hosts and you felt that you actually learned something from everybody.
I really have. You know, all the hosts, for the most part, volunteer, except for Leah. She was pretty professional, but everyone comes from different walks of life. And I think that's what makes a very interesting show, a very interesting mix of people, outlooks, viewpoints, guests. We all help each other. It's just a wonderful group that's, you know, I'll miss the friendships for sure.
Let's talk about the Emmy. Is that the Emmy sitting behind you back there on the table?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So, well,
so you got the Emmy.
My family made sure that I earned an Emmy for my efforts this last Christmas. And we have an Emmy engraved for me and my grandchildren, read from a script for the presentation. And my 5-year-old grandson declared me the queen of television. So believe me, those are the speeches I'm going to remember from that because it was an endearing evening.
Well, congratulations on the Emmy.
Thank you.
And in your new life, you're going to get a chance to do some traveling.
Well, we hope so. After the pandemic eases, we might institute our retirement plan, and we'll see where it takes us, I guess. But I have been so truly honored to be on Live and Learn and to be able to tell the stories that I have been able to tell. I think everybody has a story, and it's wonderful to share those with the public. So, and a huge shout out and thanks to Link City TV, to Dave Norris. Oh my goodness, everybody makes the hosts feel so comfortable when we're on air. And for a volunteer host, that's very important because nerves can get the better of you if you let them. So I thank everybody involved, and I don't know, I'm almost emotional.
Well, I know I speak for all of us when we say we will miss you. And we wish you the best in life and health, and that we hope every once in a while you'll come back and say hello.
Well, I certainly hope to, in person.
Very good. And we want to thank all of you for tuning in today as well. I'm your host, Jerry Renaud. Stay safe, healthy, and happy. And always remember, it's never too late to live and learn.